You know, uh, Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this expectation of clinical precision.
Right, like it's purely scientific.
Exactly. It's like engineering. You break your arm, the x-ray shows that jagged white line on the radius bone, and the doctor just points and says, well, there it is.
It's visible. You can categorize it, put it in a neat little box, and just apply a standardized treatment protocol.
Yeah, but then you step into the world of personal finance, wealth building, and behavioral economics, and suddenly, that x-ray machine is completely broken.
It really is.
And if you're listening to this right now, whether you're trying to bootstrap a startup, climb the corporate ladder, or just, optimize the tax-free growth in your Roth IRA, you've probably felt this.
Oh, absolutely. Everyone feels it.
Right, because we expect money to be just like an x-ray, pure math, spreadsheets, compound interest charts. But instead, we're looking at a diagnostic landscape that is incredibly murky.
Because we aren't just dealing with numbers on a screen. I mean, if personal finance were just about the math, everyone with a basic calculator would be a millionaire.
Seriously.
The muddy waters exist because we are dealing with human psychology, sociological pressure, and, frankly, a biological wiring that is fundamentally at odds with long-term wealth accumulation.
Which brings us to the core of what we are unpacking in today's deep dive. We're looking at the insights from David Chilton's work, specifically The Wealthy Barber Returns.
A fascinating read.
It really is. And what makes this material so compelling isn't that it's a dry textbook or a checklist of budgeting rules.
No, not at all.
It's a fiercely intelligent, humorous, and sometimes contrarian look at why incredibly smart, ambitious people do incredibly dumb things with their capital.
I mean, people who run companies, who code brilliantly, who understand complex systems.
Exactly. They just totally self-sabotage. So our mission today is to uncover these hidden psychological traps of consumerism, decode the actual mathematical realities of investing on Wall Street, and provide you with actionable strategies for achieving financial freedom.
Because the overarching theme here is the tension between the straightforward mechanics of financial planning and the absolute chaos of human nature.
Well said.
Before we can even begin to talk about building an offense, capital allocation, index funds, compound interest, we really have to look at the defense.
We have to understand why we are biologically and socially programmed to sabotage our own wealth.
Right. And the author starts with a very harsh reality.
Yeah.
He points out that unless you marry into wealth or inherit a massive fortune.
Which, hey, are both highly effective strategies, to be fair.
Very true. But assuming you don't do that, you absolutely must spend less than you make.
Yeah.
But he immediately reframes this, which I love.
Yeah, he puts a really positive spin on it.
Exactly. Instead of the traditional financial advisor guilt trip about how we are all terrible savers, he says, no, we aren't bad savers. We're just fantastic spenders.
I love that. It's a crucial distinction. We need to stop viewing our inability to save as a moral failing and start viewing it as a biological inevitability.
Yes, because if we look at the actual science of neuroeconomics, we see exactly why we are such fantastic spenders. Our brains are essentially engaged in a civil war.
Okay, unpack that for us. What do you mean by a civil war?
So on one side, you have the prefrontal cortex. This is the executive center of your brain, responsible for logic, reason, and long-term planning.
It's the part of you that understands the power of compounding and wants to fully fund your 401k.
Exactly. But that executive functioning is constantly battling our emotional instant gratification wiring in the limbic system. And that limbic system evolved millions of years earlier to ensure survival in an environment of extreme scarcity.
So it wants the dopamine hit right now.
Right now. It doesn't care about your retirement in 30 years.
I think about this constantly when I look at the modern consumer landscape. It really feels like our prefrontal cortex is hopelessly outmatched.
Oh, completely outmatched.
You look at companies like Apple, Amazon, Meta, they are deploying billions of dollars in R&D and employing thousands of the smartest engineers in Silicon Valley for one specific purpose.
To remove friction.
Yes, to completely remove the friction between a stimulus and a purchase. You see an ad on Instagram, your phone reads your face with Face ID, Apple Pay processes the transaction, and the item is literally on its way to your house before your executive brain even fully processes what just happened.
It's brilliant, but terrifying.
Yeah.
You are essentially fighting an asymmetric war. The tech platforms have weaponized our own dopamine receptors against us.
So if tech companies are spending billions to do this, aren't we bringing a knife to a gunfight? How do you fight back against a system designed to bypass your logical brain?
Well, the neuroeconomists, and the source material by extension, lean heavily on a concept from Stephen R. Covey. It's all about injecting time between stimulus and response.
Injecting time? Okay.
If the modern American economy is designed to make spending frictionless, your primary job as a wealth builder is to artificially introduce friction back into your own life.
But isn't that just a fancy way of saying we need more willpower? I mean, if I want the new Tesla and I have the cash flow to make the monthly payment, creating friction just sounds like I'm delaying the inevitable.
Well, willpower is a heavily misunderstood concept. Behavioral psychology tells us that willpower is not a character trait. It is a depletable resource.
Like a battery.
Exactly like a battery. If you spend your entire day making complex decisions at work, negotiating contracts, or managing a team, your cognitive load is maxed out.
Right.
So by 8 p.m., when you are scrolling through e-commerce sites on your couch, your willpower is fundamentally depleted. That is when the friction needs to be systemic, not willpower-based.
So what does systemic friction actually look like?
The author talks about some radical but effective behavioral interventions, like literally freezing your credit cards in a block of ice.
Wait, really? Actual ice?
Actual ice. It sounds ridiculous, but if you want to make an impulse purchase, you have to wait for the ice to melt. By the time it thaws, your prefrontal cortex has re-engaged, the dopamine spike has subsided, and the emotional impulse to buy has faded.
That is wild. Okay, but let's say you bypass the friction. You thaw the card, you make the impulse buy, you get the new car, the designer watch, the massive home renovation. Why doesn't the joy last?
The million-dollar question.
Right, because if you're listening, you know this feeling. We always assume that a new purchase will provide the exact same thrill on day 300 as it did on day 1, but it just never does.
What you are describing is the biological mechanism of habituation, or what economists call declining marginal utility.
Declining marginal utility.
From an evolutionary standpoint, it is a survival mechanism. Our brains are hardwired to pay intense attention to novel stimuli and then rapidly adapt to them.
Why do we adapt to them?
So we can focus our cognitive resources on the next potential threat or reward in our environment.
So the dopamine hit literally just wears off because our brain stops perceiving the new car as new and just categorizes it as background environment.
Completely. The first time you sit in a luxury vehicle, your brain registers the smell of the leather, the quiet cabin, the acceleration. It's a massive sensory reward.
Right. It feels amazing.
But fast forward 6 months. That same vehicle is now just the physical box you sit in while you are stressed out, stuck in commuter traffic on the highway.
Yeah, totally.
The neurological joy fades entirely, but the $900 monthly payment remains exactly the same.
And because we consistently fail to factor in this declining marginal utility when we forecast our future happiness, we end up trapped on this hedonic treadmill.
Exactly. We are constantly forced to chase the next bigger dopamine hit just to replace the one that wore off.
Which perfectly describes the entire engine of the American consumer cycle. We are constantly buying new things to cure the hangover of our last purchase.
It's exhausting.
It really is. But it's not just our internal biology we're fighting, right? It's sociological, too. It's our neighbors, our coworkers, our Instagram feeds.
Oh, absolutely. The social pressure is massive.
The source brings up Juliet Shore's research on reference groups. It shows how our savings rates absolutely plummet because we are constantly trying to keep up with our peers.
Status anxiety is arguably more powerful than biological habituation. We do not benchmark our financial success against an absolute objective standard. We benchmark it relative to the people immediately surrounding us.
So true.
If you earn $150,000 a year and your peer group earns $80,000, you feel incredibly wealthy.
You're the richest person in the room.
Right. But if your peer group starts earning $300,000, upgrading their homes, flying first class, wearing high-end brands,
you subconsciously feel like you are falling behind, even though your absolute purchasing power hasn't changed one bit.
Exactly. You inflate your lifestyle just to maintain your perceived social standing within that specific tribe.
I see this all the time with people who get a promotion at work. The raise barely hits their bank account before they've bought an entirely new wardrobe to match the new title.
It happens instantly.
Which actually leads right into a concept I really want you to unpack for us, the Diderot effect. I've heard this referenced before, but how does it actually sabotage wealth?
The Diderot effect is fascinating. It's named after the French philosopher Denis Diderot, who lived a life of near poverty until he was gifted a beautiful, luxurious scarlet robe.
Okay, a nice robe.
Very nice. But once he put the robe on, he looked around his modest apartment and realized none of his other possessions matched the elegance of the robe.
Oh, I see where this is going.
His old desk looked shabby, his chairs looked cheap, so he went into massive debt replacing everything in his home to match the standard set by this one single item.
So it's a cascading domino effect of upgrades. Buying one nice thing makes everything else look terrible by comparison.
Exactly. It happens because our possessions act as a cohesive reflection of our identity. When you introduce a high-status item into that ecosystem, it shatters the cohesion.
Give me a modern example of that.
Okay, say you renovate your bathroom and put in a heated marble floor. Suddenly, the hallway carpet outside the bathroom looks dingy compared to the marble.
So you replace the carpet with expensive hardwood.
Right, but now your living room furniture looks cheap sitting on the new hardwood. So you finance a new sectional couch.
Wow, it really is a cascade.
The author frames this beautifully. He calls it a massive warning to those who have more taste than money.
I love that phrase, more taste than money.
It is precisely how high-income earners, doctors, lawyers, successful tech founders, end up living paycheck to paycheck. They buy one anchor item of luxury, and it drags their entire lifestyle cost up with it.
Okay, so if human nature provides the psychological desire to overspend and status anxiety provides the social pressure, how do we actually execute the self-sabotage?
We need tools to do it.
Right. Biology alone doesn't put you 50 grand in the hole. You need an enabler for that. Which brings us to the modern banking system. We're talking about credit cards and lines of credit.
The enablers.
The source essentially calls plastic evil. But I have to push back here for a second.
Go for it.
If I'm a responsible spender and I pay off my balance in full every single month, why shouldn't I use a credit card? I'm getting travel points, cash back, extended warranties. Honestly, I feel like I'm gaming the system and taking money from the banks.
That is the ultimate illusion of control. And the credit card industry is absolutely brilliant at marketing this exact narrative to high earners.
So I'm not gaming the system.
Not at all. Let's look at the mechanics. The author makes a brilliant comparison here.
Oh.
He equates credit card travel points to the free hotel rooms that casinos in Vegas give to heavy gamblers.
Ah, because the house always wins.
The house mathematically has to win. You feel like you're beating the system because you got a free flight to Hawaii, but the credit card companies have access to terabytes of consumer data.
And what does the data say?
It proves that the average person will inflate their overall lifestyle spending by 15 to 20%, simply because the friction of handing over physical cash has been removed.
Wow, 15 to 20% more just because it's plastic.
Exactly. You are spending thousands of extra dollars throughout the year to earn a $500 flight.
That is a terrible ROI.
And furthermore, the merchants are paying 2 to 3% swipe fees on those transactions, which they just bake into the retail price of the goods you buy. So you are paying for your own free rewards through systemic inflation of consumer goods.
That is so eye-opening. And what about the credit limits themselves? I mean, average earners are walking around with $15,000 to $25,000 of available credit in their pockets at all times.
That is an open invitation to disaster. It completely removes the natural boundary of scarcity.
Right, because for the vast majority of human history, if you didn't have the capital, you couldn't acquire the good.
The delay was built into the system. Credit cards remove the delay, which means your prefrontal cortex never gets the chance to veto the emotional purchase.
But if credit cards are the visible trap, lines of credit or LOCs, those feel like the stealthy assassins of wealth building.
Oh, they absolutely are.
There is this terrifying anecdote in the source material about a woman who finally took the advice to cut up all her credit cards to control her spending.
Yes, I remember this one.
She was doing great. She eliminated the temptation. But then she went to her local bank branch, and a nice young man at the desk saw that she had a paid-off home.
So he offered her a $150,000 line of credit collateralized against her house.
Under the guise of, just in case you need it for an emergency.
Just in case.
Right. And he explicitly told her she didn't have to use it. But, as the author points out, giving a massive line of credit to someone who self-admits they have a behavioral spending problem.
It's like sending a recovering alcoholic to wait out a rainstorm inside a bar.
Yes. It borders on financial malpractice. But we have to understand why banks push lines of credit so aggressively.
Well, from the bank's perspective, an LOC backed by home equity is incredibly safe. If you default, they just take your house.
So the risk is all on the consumer.
Exactly. But from the consumer's perspective, LOCs are insidious precisely because they don't look or feel like credit cards.
They seem more responsible somehow.
Right. They have lower interest rates, they don't have the flashy points programs, and they are marketed as sophisticated tools for responsible adults.
But fundamentally, a line of credit is just a giant, highly efficient credit card.
And that flexibility and efficiency is exactly why it is so dangerous for the roughly 72% of the population who lack strict financial discipline.
This really forces a complete reevaluation of how we view debt in this country. We've all been spoon-fed these rigid categories, right?
Good debt versus bad debt.
Yeah. A mortgage is good debt, student loans are good debt, credit cards are bad debt. But this deep dive completely tears down that framework.
Because the old framework is static and life is dynamic. The author redefines good versus bad debt with a framework that is entirely retrospective.
Retrospective, so looking backward.
Yes. He argues that the only question that matters is, will you still be glad you took on this debt when you are paying it off in the future?
That completely shifts the paradigm. Let's apply that. Say I take out a massive $100,000 line of credit for a luxury home renovation.
Okay.
I'm thrilled while the contractors are installing the custom cabinets in the Marble Island. But what happens 5 years later? What happens if it's a floating rate LOC and macroeconomic policy shifts, causing interest rates to shoot up?
Which happens all the time.
Suddenly, that monthly payment doubles. The joy of the Marble Island has completely worn off due to habituation, but the financial stress is suffocating. Do I cut back on groceries? Do I go back to work? Steal from my kids?
That retrospective regret is the definition of bad debt, and it leads to one of the absolute non-negotiable rules for financial independence. Never take debt into retirement. It is the single biggest threat to wealth preservation.
Because you don't have the income to service it anymore.
Exactly. When you retire, your human capital, your ability to trade time for income, drops to zero. You are entirely dependent on the cash flow generated by your assets.
So if you're entering retirement still servicing lifestyle debt,
Or mortgages, or massive LOCs from your working years, you are draining that cash flow, exposing yourself to massive interest rate risk, and destroying your peace of mind.
retirement is about independence. And you cannot be independent if a bank still holds a claim on your monthly cash flow.
Spot on.
Okay, so we've locked down the defense, we understand the biological traps, the sociological pressures of status anxiety, and the banking enablers. We know how we sabotage ourselves. Let's pivot to the offense.
Fun part.
Yes. How do we systematically build wealth in a system that wants to separate us from our capital?
Well, we have to start by clearing out some pervasive delusions that stop people from executing an offensive strategy in the first place. And the biggest one identified here is what's called the Grim Reaper bailout.
The Grim Reaper bailout, I see this constantly with younger generations right now.
Now it's everywhere.
It's the idea that you don't actually need to aggressively save or invest because the great wealth transfer is coming. You're just going to inherit your parents' house and their stock portfolio, so why sacrifice your lifestyle today?
It is a terrifyingly common strategy,
Mm-hmm.
and mathematically it is deeply flawed. People are banking on an inheritance to fund their own retirement, which provides psychological permission to spend recklessly in the present.
But let's look at the actual variables involved there.
Mm.
You are making assumptions about things over which you have zero control.
Zero control.
Right, because first of all, your parents are likely going to live much longer than previous generations, which is wonderful, but late life healthcare in the United States is wildly expensive. If your parents need memory care or spend 5 years in an assisted living facility, that can evaporate a multi-million-dollar estate almost entirely.
Exactly. The cost of long-term care can decimate generational wealth in a matter of years. Furthermore, government tax codes are constantly shifting.
Oh, for sure.
Estate taxes could increase, the step-up in basis for inherited assets could be eliminated. Or, honestly, your parents might just adopt the philosophy of die with zero.
Which is becoming really popular.
It is. They earn the capital, and they might decide to enjoy it by blowing it all on high-end luxury cruises and giving whatever's left to charity.
So you have no control over their capital allocation.
None. Therefore, you must treat any potential inheritance as an unexpected bonus. It can never, ever be the baseline of your financial plan.
The baseline has to be generated from your own cash flow.
Always.
Which brings us to the foundational mechanic of wealth accumulation. It's the oldest, most reliable piece of financial advice in human history.
Pay yourself first.
Yes. The author traces this back over 200 years to Benjamin Franklin. It's in every financial book ever written for one simple reason.
It works?
It is mathematically bulletproof. You have to automatically deduct 10 to 15% of your income before you even have the chance to spend it.
And this is where we return to the concept of artificially injecting friction.
How so?
If you use the traditional method, where you pay all your bills, buy your groceries, go out to dinner, and then promise to save whatever is left over at the end of the month, you will fail.
Because there's never anything left over.
Right. Parkinson's law dictates that expenses will naturally rise to meet income. But if you automate the deduction, if it goes straight from your employer's payroll into your 401k, or automatically transfers to an external brokerage account before it ever hits your checking account.
You remove the need for daily willpower. I always compare this to corporate finance.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Think about a successful tech startup in Silicon Valley. If the CEO doesn't explicitly allocate capital for research and development off the top of the budget, what happens?
Human nature takes over.
Exactly. They'll spend every single dollar on aggressive marketing campaigns, fancy office furniture, and catered lunches to boost morale. By the time they realize their product is obsolete and they need to innovate, the capital is just gone.
That's incredibly accurate.
So if you're listening to this, you are the CEO of your own life. You have to fund your future R&D, your long-term wealth building first, before the marketing, before the lifestyle catering.
That is a perfect structural analogy. It actually leads to a surprising pivot the author makes in this book regarding how we manage the capital that is left over for spending.
The pivot on expense tracking, right?
He admits that in his earlier work, he thought tracking every penny of your expenses was a waste of time. He thought it was too tedious, too restrictive, and that nobody would actually stick to it.
Which is how most people feel about budgeting.
But he did a complete 180. He now argues that meticulous expense tracking is absolutely crucial for modern wealth building.
But wait, expense tracking feels like a diet. It feels miserable. If I'm already paying myself first and hitting my 15% savings goal automatically, why do I need to track every dollar I spend on coffee or streaming services?
It feels restrictive.
Yeah. Doesn't that just turn you into a passionless robot who constantly feels guilty about spending money?
That is the common misconception. It's not about guilt. It's about capital allocation. We're all dealing with finite resources.
Okay, so it's not about shaming yourself.
Not at all. Expense tracking isn't about shaming yourself for buying a latte. It's about optimizing your joy units.
Joy units. Okay, please explain this metric because it completely changes the framework of budgeting.
It's brilliant in its simplicity. Instead of looking at a spreadsheet and feeling restricted, you analyze your past spending and ask yourself, are you getting the maximum amount of joy units per dollar spent?
So it's about finding the true ROI on your human happiness.
Exactly. For example, if you spend $30 on a great paperback book, or a few coffees with a close friend you haven't seen in months, that might provide you with 7 joy units.
It's a highly meaningful experience.
Right. But if you blindly drop $300 on a designer shirt because of status anxiety, and you only wear it twice before it sits in your closet, maybe that only yields 4 joy units.
So you're fundamentally misallocating your capital.
Precisely. You are getting a terrible return on investment. The best wealth builders are not misers. They aren't cheap.
They're just highly intentional.
Yes. They cut ruthlessly on the things that don't bring them actual joy. You know, the subscriptions they don't use, the luxury car they don't care about, so they can spend lavishly on the things that do matter to them.
Whether that's travel, philanthropy, or just buying back their own time.
Exactly. Expense tracking is simply the data collection required to figure out what actually brings you joy.
And we have to be incredibly aggressive about this capital allocation because of the massive mathematical uncertainty of retirement.
Oh, the uncertainty is huge.
We have this tendency in America to act like we can just plug a few numbers into an online retirement calculator, current age, expected return, target retirement date, and get a definitive guaranteed answer. But the variables are wildly unpredictable.
A financial plan is essentially a hypothesis based on assumptions that will almost certainly be wrong.
That is a scary thought.
But it's true.
Yeah.
We don't know our exact lifespan. We don't know what future federal tax rates will be in 20 years. We don't know if inflation will average 2% or 5% over the next 3 decades.
And we certainly cannot predict the exact sequence of market returns.
Right. A financial planner can run Monte Carlo simulations to give you probabilities, but they are still fundamentally guesses.
So because of this massive, unavoidable uncertainty, the argument is that the only logical defensive response is to save more and spend less today.
It's the only thing you can control.
Exactly. There is no magical AI software that can tell you with absolute certainty that your portfolio will survive until you're 95. The only true hedge against macroeconomic uncertainty is a highly robust personal savings rate.
Exactly. The savings rate is the one variable you actually control. And once you've optimized that, once you've paid yourself first, optimized your joy units, and built the capital, the next vital question is, where do you deploy that capital?
Yes. This is where we get into the absolute core of the deep dive, the mathematical certainty of Wall Street.
The eternal debate.
The vicious debate between passive index funds and active portfolio management. You've saved money. The natural instinct, especially in American business culture, is to want to be above average.
Of course.
We idolize the stock pickers, the hedge fund managers, the venture capitalists. We want to find the next NVIDIA before everyone else. We want to beat Wall Street. But the author lays out the mathematical proof of why you shouldn't even try.
It requires a fundamental, almost uncomfortable shift in how you view the stock market.
Uncomfortable, how is?
Well, we all want to beat the market. But mathematically, we have to realize that all investors, collectively, are the market.
Let's slow down and really unpack this, because if you're listening and you actively trade stocks, you might be rolling your eyes right now.
You probably are.
You're thinking, there is no way my boring Vanguard S and P500 fund is better than hiring a professional analyst to pick winning stocks. But the math says otherwise.
It does. And to explain this, the book uses a brilliant thought experiment. It's the gurus versus index analogy.
This is the moment the light bulb usually goes on for people who are skeptical of passive investing.
Okay, let's set the stage. Imagine a highly simplified stock market. In this hypothetical market, there are only 4 funds, and they each control exactly 25% of all the capital in the entire market.
Okay, 4 equal funds.
Right. Fund number 1 is a simple, brain-dead index fund.
Right.
It employs no analysts, does no research. It just buys every single stock in the market and holds it forever.
So by definition, because it owns everything in its exact proportion, it guarantees the exact market average return.
Correct. Now, the other 3 funds are actively managed by absolute legends of finance. Fund 2 is managed by Warren Buffett.
Okay.
Fund 3 is managed by Charlie Munger. And Fund 4 is managed by George Soros.
Wow, quite the lineup.
So 25% of the money in the market is passive, and 75% is actively managed by 3 of the greatest financial hounds in human history.
Now imagine an average retail investor, let's say your mom, has $30,000 to invest for her retirement. She has a choice.
She could try to pick individual stocks on her own, she could split her money between the 3 gurus, or she could just buy the boring index fund.
Let's break down the math on that. If she buys the index fund, she gets the market average, period. But here's where it gets deeply counterintuitive.
This is the kicker.
Because the index fund makes up 25% of the market and perfectly matches the market average, that means the remaining 75% of the market, which is completely controlled by Buffett, Munger, and Soros, must also collectively equal the exact market average.
It is an inescapable mathematical absolute.
Wait, really?
Yes. If the total market is up 10% for the year and the index fund is up 10%, then the combined aggregate return of Buffett, Munger, and Soros must be exactly 10%.
Because they make up the rest of the market.
They cannot collectively beat the market because they are the active market.
So let's play this out. Let's say Warren Buffett has a phenomenal year. He analyzes the market perfectly and beats the average by 4%. He gets a 14% return.
Good for Warren.
And George Soros also crushes it. He beats the market by 2% and gets a 12% return. Because their aggregate return must average out to 10%, that means Charlie Munger, again, one of the greatest investors ever, must dramatically underperform.
Mathematically, he has to.
He would have to return something like 4% just to drag the active average back down to 10%.
Precisely. Active management is a zero-sum game before fees are even calculated. For every basis point of outperformance by one active manager, there must be an equal amount of underperformance by another active manager.
It is mathematically impossible for active managers as a group to beat the market.
Impossible.
So what does this actually mean for Mom and her $30,000?
It means that if she buys the passive index fund, she is mathematically guaranteed to tie the aggregate performance of the greatest financial minds in the world before fees are deducted.
She gets the exact same gross return as the collective genius of Wall Street.
Yes, and here is the best part. She mathematically beats them after fees are deducted.
Ah, the fees.
Because Buffett, Munger, and Soros are not working for free. They are going to charge you a 1% management fee or 2% fee or maybe a 2 and 20 hedge fund structure for their active expertise.
Well, the index fund is just run by algorithms.
Right. It charges practically nothing, maybe 4 basis points or 0.04%. So after the friction of fees is applied, the passive index investor mathematically wins against the aggregate of active managers every single time.
This is exactly why the author jokes about trademarking the phrase, average is the new fantastic.
I love that phrase.
Because the word average has a negative connotation in American culture. We think it means mediocre.
Do want to be the best.
But in investing, actively accepting the market average through a low-cost index fund and keeping your fee drag near zero mathematically guarantees you will be an above-average investor relative to everyone else who is bleeding capital through high fees and trading costs trying to beat the market.
I think about that quote he includes from William F. Sharpe, the Nobel laureate in economics.
No, that's a great quote.
Sharpe basically says that believing you can easily beat the market requires suspending the laws of arithmetic. You literally have to ignore middle school math to believe active management wins in the aggregate over a long time horizon.
Even Warren Buffett himself, the ultimate active investor, famously instructed in his will that upon his death, his wife's inheritance should be put 90% into a very low-cost S&P 500 index fund.
Which tells you everything you need to know.
If the greatest stock picker of all time says indexing is the best way for the vast majority of people to own equities, we should probably listen.
But here is the tragedy of it all. Even when people understand the math, even when they buy good, low-cost index funds, they still manage to sabotage themselves behaviorally.
They still mess it up.
And this brings us to the absolute folly of market timing. People look at their portfolios during a recession, a geopolitical crisis, or a market correction. They panic, and they sell low to stop the bleeding.
It's unbelievable to watch. You see incredibly smart professionals look at a 30% drop in the S&P 500 and say, I'm going to get out now, move to cash, wait for things to calm down, and buy back in at the bottom.
It's crazy.
Think about the sheer arrogance and absurdity of that strategy. You are intentionally selling your assets at a massive discount, permanently locking in your losses, and then assuming you have the psychic macroeconomic foresight to perfectly time the absolute bottom of the market to buy back in before the rebound happens.
It is the triumph of raw emotion over logic. When the market drops violently, the news cycle is terrifying. Every headline is predicting economic doom.
The sky is falling.
Right. In that moment, your prefrontal cortex is completely hijacked by your amygdala, the fear center of the brain. You aren't making a rational financial decision based on discounted cash flows. You're having a biological stress response.
I for flight.
You sell your index funds simply to relieve the agonizing psychological pressure of watching your net worth evaporate on a screen. But in doing so, you violate the most basic fundamental rule of investing. Buy low, sell high.
But wait, let's play devil's advocate for a second.
Sure.
If I hold a tech-heavy index fund, or even a massive company like NVIDIA, and it drops 40% because of a shift in AI regulation, shouldn't I cut my losses? Isn't holding on just stubbornness?
Well, if you are holding individual stocks, the calculus is different because individual companies can and do go to zero.
Right, companies go bankrupt.
But if you are holding a broadly diversified market index, you are betting on the long-term growth of the American economy and global innovation. If you sell out of the broad market after a 40% drop, your strategy essentially becomes intentionally sell low and hope you correctly guess when to buy high.
Which is impossible.
It's madness. The data shows that the market's biggest gaining days almost always occur immediately following the biggest drops. If you are in cash waiting for the dust to settle, you miss the recovery, and your compound interest curve is permanently broken.
You just have to set it, automate it, and aggressively ignore the financial news.
Aggressively ignore it, yes.
Which brings us to the final major hurdle in wealth building. We know how to save by paying ourselves first. We know we need to optimize joy units. We know how to invest by using low-cost index funds and avoiding market timing, but reality is rarely that clean.
Life is messy.
Very. We have competing priorities for our capital. Let's dive into the eternal dilemma. Debt versus investing.
This is the question every financial planner hears constantly. Do you pay off the mortgage early, or do you take that excess cash flow and max out the retirement account?
Right. And before we debate the strategy, let's quickly touch on the mechanics of the tax-advantaged accounts we're talking about. The text mentions Canadian vehicles, but the mathematical principles are identical for an American mindset.
Exactly the same.
We are talking about the difference between traditional 401ks and IRAs versus Roth 401ks and Roth IRAs. When you are trying to optimize the tax-free growth in these accounts, it feels like a pure math problem.
Both are incredibly powerful tools because they shelter your compound interest from the continuous erosive drag of annual taxes. Tax drag is the silent killer of wealth.
It really is.
The question remains, if you have an extra $1,000 a month, should you prioritize fully funding these tax-sheltered accounts to capture market growth? Or should you take that cash flow and aggressively pay down the principal on your home mortgage?
It is the great debate. And it really comes down to a comparison of risk-adjusted returns. If I have a mortgage with a 6% interest rate and I pay an extra $1,000 toward the principal, I am effectively earning a guaranteed risk-free 6% return on that money.
Which is fantastic.
And crucially, I don't pay taxes on that return. Psychologically, it feels incredible to owe the bank less money. It buys peace of mind.
Exactly. It's a guaranteed reduction in your liabilities. But on the other side of the ledger, investing that same $1,000 in equities via an S&P 500 index fund offers a potentially higher historical return, perhaps 8 to 10% over the long haul.
Keyword being potentially. Equities come with inherent risks and massive volatility. Over a 30-year timeline, the stock market will very likely outperform a fixed mortgage rate, but it is not guaranteed, and you have to stomach the terrifying downturns we just talked about without selling.
And this is where behavioral finance intersects with pure math.
Oh, wait, let me push back on this, especially for the younger listeners. Let's say I'm 30 years old. I have a 30-year time horizon before retirement.
No.
Shouldn't I actually want the market to struggle early on?
How do you mean?
If I'm dollar cost averaging $1,000 a month into an index fund, a flat or down market just means I'm accumulating a massive amount of shares at a lower price.
Buying them on sale.
Right. If I divert that money to pay down my 6% mortgage instead, I completely miss out on a decade of accumulating cheap equity that will eventually compound exponentially. Doesn't the math heavily favor investing for the young?
That is a very sophisticated counterargument, and mathematically, assuming a 30-year horizon and strict discipline to never sell during a crash, you are likely correct.
Okay, but...
However, you are assuming a level of robotic rationality that most humans do not possess. What happens if you lose your job during that market crash?
The real world happens.
Right. The mortgage payment is still due, but now your equity portfolio is down 40% and you have no cash flow. This is why the most prudent approach is often to diversify by strategy.
So do a bit of both.
Exactly. You put some of your excess cash flow toward tax-advantaged growth in the market, and you put some toward debt reduction. You build your financial plan, assuming stocks will be reasonable long-term performers, but you don't rely on them being guaranteed to perform perfectly over your specific timeline.
You hedge your bets against your own behavioral reactions.
Yes.
I think the ultimate answer to this debate is actually the quote shared in the book from the brilliant actuary Malcolm Hamilton when a client frantically asks him, which one should I do? Pay down the mortgage or fund the retirement account? His answer is just perfect.
I love this quote.
He says, yes.
Yeah.
Immediately.
It completely cuts right through the noise and the optimization paralysis. The truth is, both actions are fantastic financial moves that definitively increase your net worth.
The danger isn't picking the slightly suboptimal mathematical strategy between the two.
Not at all.
The real danger is analysis paralysis. You spend 6 months building complex spreadsheets, debating the historical risk premiums of equities versus debt, and in the meantime, that extra $1,000 a month just sits in your checking account until the friction of spending it disappears.
And you end up spending it.
You end up rationalizing the purchase of a new hot tub or a luxury vacation instead of doing either. The real enemy of wealth is procrastination.
And that brings us perfectly to the synthesis of everything we've unpacked today. We've covered the neurobiology of spending, the sociological traps of consumerism, the mathematical illusion of Wall Street active management, and the behavioral mechanics of saving.
It's a lot to process.
It is, but the core identity of a successful wealth builder really boils down to accepting a piece of wisdom from Leonardo da Vinci. Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication.
I absolutely love that framing. Simplicity, low-cost index funds, automated, friction-free savings, ruthlessly avoiding high-interest consumer debt.
It's not flashy.
No, it's not. You won't sound like a Wall Street insider or a venture capitalist at cocktail parties. but it fundamentally works.
because it accounts for the human element. The reason so many complex, hyper-optimized financial plans fail is that they assume human beings are perfectly rational, calculating machines.
And as we've discussed for this entire deep dive, we aren't.
Not even close.
We are emotional, we are terrified of market crashes, we are deeply distracted by what our peers are buying, and we are easily tempted by environments designed for frictionless spending.
To succeed, you have to get out of your own way. You have to automate your success, physically limit your access to credit, and accept that you cannot outsmart the aggregate intelligence of the global market.
It's about designing a life architecture where doing the right thing happens automatically, and doing the wrong thing requires an annoying amount of effort.
Exactly.
So if you're listening to this, we want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over. We've spent this entire deep dive discussing how your brain, your peers, and society are intricately engineered to make you part with your capital.
They are working against you.
The tech giants, the banks, the marketers, they are all working overtime using cutting-edge behavioral science to remove the friction from taking your money. What if, starting today, you flipped the script?
I like that.
What if you engineered your own environment so that building wealth was your frictionless, automatic default, and spending money required immense, deliberate effort?
Imagine that.
If you automated your investments off the top of your paycheck, deleted your saved credit cards from every browser, and forced yourself to calculate the joy units of every purchase, who would you be 10 years from now?
You'd likely be financially independent, but more importantly, you'd have bought back your own time, and you'd have a lot more peace of mind.
And in the end, that's the ultimate return on investment. Take a hard look at your own financial architecture today. Find the muddy waters, clear them up with a little systemic automation, and start building. Stay curious, invest wisely, build valuable skills, and always think critically about your long-term success.